Come on, you can think of it. Oof. Woo! Howdy, and welcome to a brand new broadcast edition, a video enhanced version of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Let your friends know that we're back on the air live with video. Now, if you don't mind looking at my face, you can catch Focal Point live on YouTube and on our Facebook page as well. So good to have you in the conversation with video. I had a guy, had Joe Gilly out from AFA yesterday, flew out here just to get our video stuff working, did an absolutely great job. But anyway, welcome to Focal. Yeah, we did enough. Debbie and I spent a little bit of time on the studio over the last week. I've got behind me the painting. It's not a painting, it's a picture of Shoshone Falls in Idaho. Twin Falls is a town near there, got its name from these falls. Actually, more water goes over Shoshone Falls than goes over Niagara. And this picture was taken by a good friend of mine who was my worship leader for years, for probably a dozen years as my worship leader. Very gifted photographer. He took the picture, went through and used Photoshop, very sophisticated Photoshop technology to get rid of every human imprint. So the telephone poles at the top of the ridge are gone. The powerhouse, the top of the cliff, is gone. No power lines. All you see is what the pioneers would have seen when they came across the plain. So that's good. I still have the Lewis and Clark map in the studio, but it's up above the map of Shoshone Falls. Also did a little bit of rearranging of pictures and other kinds of things on the shelf, so I hope you enjoy that. Yeah. Oh, no. I forgot you were going to check on that. No, we didn't send him back with Rice Krispie treats that Debbie's specialty. So I just bummed Jeff and Bobby out completely by dashing their hopes for some Rice Krispie treats. Yep. Yeah, well, thank you for the reminder. It made me feel even more guilty. But anyway, you are listening to Focal Point on American Family Radio. I am Bryan Fischer, your host, congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent. Jeff and Bobby Rosa, who is sitting in Rob Gardner's seat. We have said sayonara to Rob Gardner. Sent him off with our best wishes, with the blessings of God, into his retirement. Now Bobby is taking his place. Pretty big set of shoes to fill. Jeff? All right. Got a new guy sitting in the new chair. All right, well, listen, I want to jump right into the Word as quickly as we can here. I want to remind you can get podcasts. We have podcasts available every day. You can get them at afr.net, where you can audio stream this program live. Just go to afr.net. You can audio stream Focal Point Live no matter where in the world you happen to be. You can listen to the program live. You can also get podcasts. We put the podcasts up there, available probably 15 to 20 minutes after the program is over. Get a podcast app for your phone, your iPhone, or your Android, and then go and subscribe to the Focal Point podcast. It'll give you an alert, load right up, and you'll be able to keep track, never have to miss a segment. Email address, if you want to contact us that way, is focalpoint@afa.net. Follow me on Twitter @Bryan J. Fischer. And also a reminder that not only can you get the Boy to Man book in our bookstore, afastore.net, but you can get a copy of my brand new book on the Constitution, Urban Legends of the Constitution, available exclusively through Amazon. So just go to Amazon, put Urban Legends of the Constitution, it'll pop right up, and you can get what you need right there. Had something else that I was thinking about. I wanted to be sure that I talked about it now. Oh, yes. I sent a tweet out about this, put it on the Facebook page. We have a Focal Point t-shirt now. It's kind of in military green, got Focal Point in bold letters across the front, got the American flag on the right sleeve, says the home of muscular Christianity, and you can get that t-shirt at afastore.net. So get your Focal Point t-shirt at afastore.net. All right, cool. Okay, good. Appreciate that, Jeff. Be sure and do that. All right, well, let's get into the Word now. Today, I want to talk for a few minutes about what I believe is a lost art in the church today, in the body of Christ, and that is the lost art of forgiveness. Remember Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, he instructed us to ask God to forgive us our debts as we have also forgiven our debtors. So on a daily basis, Jesus taught us, we need to ask the question, is there something I need God to forgive me for? Now we're talking here about debts. A debt is something that we owe to someone and we haven't paid. We owed them something and we didn't pay it. That's what we need to ask God forgiveness for. We come to God and we say, God, I owed you this today and I didn't give it to you. I owed it to you to offer self-control, and instead I blew my top at my wife or my kids or one of my friends or one of my coworkers, and I need you to forgive me for not giving you what I owed you. And then we need to ask ourselves, is there anyone who needs forgiveness from me? Is there someone who owed me something in our relationship and didn't give it to me? When that happens, they become debtors to us. They owed us something that they didn't give us. And Jesus commands us here, this is not a recommendation, this is not just a good idea, it's a command to forgive others for their debts to us, just as God has forgiven us for our debts to Him. Now we know that we need forgiveness from God virtually every day, but there are people also who need forgiveness from us every day too. So we are to keep short accounts with God and with man. We need to settle our accounts with God every day. We need to settle our accounts with people every day. And again, this is something we need to do every day. How often are we supposed to pray the disciples' prayer? We call it the Lord's Prayer, but it's really the disciples' prayer that He taught us to give. How often are we supposed to pray this prayer? Well, He tells us right in there, give us this day our daily bread. So this is a prayer that in some way or another we need to pray every single day. And Jesus says a sobering thing here. He says if we don't forgive the people who are in our debt, the Father will not forgive us the debt that we owe to Him. Need to let that sink in for a minute, because that is a sobering thing. This is Jesus' words. If you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive you your trespasses. So this is an issue of paramount importance in the life of a believer. Now, what's a trespass? It's when somebody crosses a line with you. When somebody violates some appropriate boundary in your relationship, and we know when that happens because it makes us mad. We know when they do that because they cross the line with us and it ticks us off. Now, Jesus says you can't just slough that off. You can't just ignore it, because it will eat you up. It'll cause a root of bitterness to spring up in your soul that will defile us and everybody around us. So we need to forgive others for that trespass before the day is done. Same thing that Paul is talking about in our passage for today in Ephesians 4. He says in Ephesians 4, be angry and do not sin. So notice clearly that not all anger is sin. There are some things that make us angry because they ought to make us angry, but we need to handle that anger in a way that does not lead us to sin or lead us into sin. And Paul says we do that by dealing with our anger against somebody else before the day is over. The day they do something that makes us angry, that's the day we need to forgive them before God. Paul says, do not let the sun go down on your anger, and listen to this, give no opportunity. Literally, the word means place. Give no place to the devil. So if we don't forgive somebody who has angered us before we go to sleep, we have given a little piece of ground, a little piece of turf in our lives, and in the relationship we're talking about, it gives the devil a foothold. And the devil will use that as a launching area, a staging area, as long as we let him. He won't just be satisfied with having that amount of turf. He's going to use that as a base of operations and try to take as much of our souls as he can. So we need to stop him by doing business with God every day. So what does it mean not to let the sun go down on our anger? It means to forgive anybody that made us angry that day. That's the sign that we need to forgive somebody when they make us angry. Now, clearly, when Jesus is talking here about us forgiving others, he's talking about a choice we need to make. We think of forgiveness as an emotion, but it's not. It's a decision. It's a decision of the will. What it means is that we bring our anger towards somebody over whatever they did to us. We bring it before God, and we say, God, this person really did a nasty thing to me today, and it really ticked me off. It really angered me. But I come before you now, and I choose to forgive them. I forgive them for what they did to me and for the way that it made me feel. Lord, it really hurt, but I choose to forgive them anyway. And we say to the Lord, look, I'm going to take them off my hook. I'm not going to try to get even with them. That's your job. I'm going to release them from the debt that they owe me. And Lord, I'm going to hang them on your hook. I'm going to turn them over to you. If they need to be corrected or disciplined for what they did to me, I'm going to turn that whole thing over to you. Well, let's take some of these things from Ephesians 4 and take them to prayer. Heavenly Father, I pray that we will no longer be children, tossed around by every wind of teaching that has its source in human cunning and craftiness instead of in your word. Reveal to us any way in which we have been deceived by lies that come from the schemes of the devil. I pray instead that we will learn to speak the truth in love so that we may grow up in every way into Christ, who is the head of the body. I pray that each part of your body will do its proper work so that the body of Christ may build itself up in love. We recognize that many around us walk in the futility of their minds. Their understanding has been darkened, and they're alienated from your life. We grieve that so many have become callous to the truth and have given themselves up to sensuality and the practice of every kind of impurity. I pray that each of us will put off the old man by putting away falsehood and put on the new man by speaking the truth with each other. May we put off the old man by not sinning when we are angry. May we never forget that we, even as believers, give place and opportunity and influence over us to the devil by letting the sun go down on our anger. May we put off the old man by refusing to let any unwholesome or rotten speech come out of our mouths. I pray that in this way we will imitate you and imitate Christ, who loved us and gave himself for us. In his name I pray. Amen. Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Jeff, what was that thumbs up? Oh. Okay. Okay, back live at 5. All right, let's just jump into content here right away. You might be aware of this. I don't think they'll get anywhere with it, but it shows you where the Democratic Party, remember, they kicked God out of their entire party. It happened at the 2012 Democrat National Convention, and somebody made a motion to put God back in the platform of the Democratic Party. It got booed down. So the guy tried it again. And again it got drowned in a chorus of boos. Tried it a third time, it happened again, and finally he just overruled them and said the ayes have it, because they knew how bad it would look if there was no mention of God in the Democratic Party platform. Even if you don't mean it, you still got to pay lip service to God. Now, there's an organization called Secular Democrats of America, has a 28-page list of demands, and one congressman at least from Illinois has signed on to this, along with a number of other congressmen. And here are some of the things. This is what they're calling on Joe Biden to do. This is the Democratic Party, ladies and gentlemen. And this is their view of religious liberty in America. Secular Democrats of America. He wants Biden to eliminate government support for all crisis pregnancy centers and all abstinence-only education programs in schools. He wants to incentivize states to strip parents of all non-medical exemptions to mandatory vaccinations. That's coming with this COVID thing. It's going to be mandatory, and parents are not going to be allowed to have any kind of religious objections to that if these Democrats have their way. They want Biden to remove "In God We Trust" from U.S. currency. They want to repeal the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. They want to rescind and replace Donald Trump's Department of Justice federal protections for religious liberty. What does it mean? It means they were effective. That means that Donald Trump's federal protections from the Department of Justice were effective. They were so effective at providing a wall of protection for religious liberty, they got to tear that thing down. They want to reverse the Trump administration policy that allowed faith-based government-funded contractors to provide adoption and foster care services, and work with Congress to pass the Every Child Deserves a Parent Act. They want to robustly fund comprehensive sex education. And the last thing they tell Biden, we urge you to avoid using the phrase Judeo-Christian values. Now let's listen to a Democrat flail around trying to lead the LA City Council in the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, when we do the Pledge of Allegiance, it's not just words to us. To Democrats, it's just words. It's just some kind of incantation you do before some kind of political meeting to pay some kind of lip service to God. But when we pledge allegiance, when we do it, we pledge allegiance to the flag and to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands. We're pledging loyalty to the flag, loyalty to the republic that we are a part of. And we're expressing our belief that we are one nation, not many nations, not a fractured nation made up of little many individual identity groups. We are one nation under God. We have a shared belief, a shared trust in the God who created it. That's what makes us one nation, because we honor God, we revere Him, and we honor His values and His standards for life. That's what makes us one. You want to know what the biggest unifying thing in America could be and should be? The Ten Commandments. You know, there was a day when everybody in America knew that the Ten Commandments were from God. They were God's commandments for living, and they knew what most of them were, and they actually thought, you know, we really ought to obey those things. That's where unity comes from, a shared set of values from the Judeo-Christian tradition. Anyway, let's go to clip number 1. This is Kevin De Leon LA City Council. This guy's an elected official, ladies and gentlemen. Listen to him butcher beyond recognition the Pledge of Allegiance. Clip 1. Hang on. Ha! Hang on. Hang on. It's coming. It's coming. Did you catch that last thing? Last thing he said before he sat down was oof. He said, man, I know I mangled that thing. I butchered that thing. Oof. And there wasn't one. Or somebody who had a copy of it that he could read from. Yeah. Yeah. We put our hand over our hearts. That was in public schools. Everybody did that, public or private school. All right, we are heading toward this sham impeachment trial. It's going to start on February 8th, rather. And here's Rand Paul talking one more time. We played several sound bites from Rand Paul yesterday about the double standard that the Democrats are following in pursuing this impeachment. And he talks about it again in this soundbite, clip 2, Rand Paul. And we are reasonable people, Rand Paul says. Conservatives are reasonable people. We use rationality. We use reason to sort through issues. We aren't driven by sheer emotion. We aren't driven like the Democrats of today are by a sheer, pure, unadulterated, vitriolic, volcanic rage that's directed at Donald Trump. That's a form, ladies and gentlemen, of mental illness. What we're looking at in the Democrat Party, looking at in regressives today, is a form of mental illness. The obsession they have with Donald Trump is not a healthy place mentally for people to be. So that's so we'll see what happens with that, with the impeachment trial. Tim Kaine says we have better things to do. We don't have enough time for this. This is a waste of our time. He wants Trump to be censured, but he doesn't want him to be impeached. He thinks that's the wrong way for the American people to do it. Remember, he used to be a vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, and he thinks this impeachment idea is we're going down the wrong road on this whole deal. We got to prioritize our time a little bit better than that. You got 5 Republicans, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, the general, the brigadier general of the Benedict Arnold Brigade in the Republican Party. You got Ben Sasse. Now, I don't know what happened to that guy, but that guy is gone from Nebraska. I liked him when he first got to Congress. He's lost me, and I think he's lost a lot of his constituents. He is a fierce, vitriolic, never-Trumper at this stage. Pat Toomey, who is not running for office again, so he can say these things without any consequence. I don't think he'd be so cavalier about voting with the Democrats that the impeachment is constant. He wouldn't be so cavalier about that if he had to stand for re-election. And so the reality is that these people believe, these 5 Republicans believe that the impeachment is constitutional, but it's not what they believe. What they believe in is their shared obsessive hatred of Donald Trump. They hate him so bad, they want to kill him, his political career, after he's already dead. Now, speaking of another anti-Trumper in the Republican Party, Liz Cheney actually voted to impeach Donald Trump, and her support in Wyoming has completely collapsed. Remember, her father was a former vice president, Dick Cheney, former vice president of the United States under George Bush, and she came into office with a tremendous amount of goodwill, name recognition. People in Wyoming loved her. Now, since she voted to impeach Donald Trump, they want her out of office. They're ready to carry her out of office in a sedan chair if she will go. She's fallen behind her primary challenger. After she did that, a challenger filed to run against her in 2022. He's already leading her by more than 30 points. He's leading her by 33 points already ahead of Liz Cheney. So her support has completely collapsed. 73% of Republicans in Wyoming do not like her. They view her unfavorably. 62% of all voters, Republican and Democrat alike, view her at this point unfavorably. Only 10% of Republican voters say they would vote to re-elect her, and again, she's behind by 33 points to her challenger. So I think you can just about certainly stick a fork in Liz Cheney's congressional career. I think it is over. All right, well, let's a couple other quick items on the culture front. If Joe Biden is looking for unity, he says he wants to be about unity, he wants to unify Americans. Well, President Biden, here's a way you can do that. They fraudulently elected Joe Biden. Here's how you can do it. I'm looking at two, not one, but two national polls that show that in America there is a bipartisan unity on prohibiting taxpayer funding of abortion in the United States and abroad. And they also, on a bipartisan basis, support abortion restrictions. One of these polls done by the Knights of Columbus and Marist, and the other one done by Students for Life of America. And what these polls revealed, the Marist poll, that's a respected polling firm, they found that 77% of Americans oppose or strongly oppose the use of taxpayer funds for abortions overseas. This is 2 points higher than it was last year. So opposition to forcing Americans to fund abortions overseas is actually growing instead of diminishing. This is right at the time where Joe Biden has pledged that he's going to overturn the Mexico City policy. That's a policy that was first enacted in 1976 that prohibits the use of American taxpayer dollars from going to fund or promote abortions overseas. Reinstated by Donald Trump, the most pro-life president in the history of America, and now Joe Biden wants to reverse that thing. You know, 55% of Democrats oppose funding of abortions overseas. 95% of Republicans do. 85% of independents do. Only 19% of Americans. So when Joe Biden says, I'm looking to unify, this is the wrong way to go about it, Mr. President, because only 19% of Americans are with you. Less than 1 in 5 Americans want to see American taxpayer dollars go to kill babies in the womb. Even 64% of pro-choice Americans, people that are for abortion, they just don't think Americans should be compelled to fund it with their taxpayer dollars. And in the Marist poll, 76% of Americans support significant restrictions on abortion. So if Joe Biden's looking for a way to unify America, that's where it would be. Like they've done in Poland. Poland, the government of Poland, remember this used to be behind the Iron Curtain, used to be under communist control, used to be part of the communist empire of the Soviet Union. They announced yesterday that they are implementing, the government of Poland, this is not just a pro-life group in Poland, but the government of Poland announced yesterday they're implementing a ruling that will ban most abortions, except for rape, incest, and when the mother's life or health is endangered. Now the reality is, I do not think we ought to punish a baby ever for the sins of its father or the sins of its mother. So rape and incest, that baby has a right to life regardless of those circumstances. And the mother's life, what we know from medical professionals is a mother's life is never endangered. Abortion is never necessary. I mean, not ever is an abortion necessary to save a mother's life. And what Poland began by doing is banning abortions based on birth defects. They said, look, that's just a form of eugenics. Remember, they were overrun by Nazi Germany, so they've got a history with Germany and with their Holocaust policies. And this was a policy, this eugenics policy, was practiced by Nazis against Jews and against the disabled. In other words, they murdered Jews because they were Jews, and they murdered the disabled because they were disabled. Poland says today, not on our watch. All right, and speaking on the culture front, Anthony Blinken, I don't know where Winken and Nod are, but Anthony Blinken, who is the new Secretary of State replacing Mike Pompeo, who was strongly pro-life and strongly pro-family, he is immediately going to begin defending LGBT rights and allow every embassy in the world to fly the Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio, the home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Well, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, we got our video fixed, but apparently now we're having some audio problems, so we're going to try to troubleshoot that after the program is over today. You can go to afr.net again, and you can listen to the program, a live audio feed there, so you don't miss any of the sound bites. Jeff? Yeah. Okay, hopefully we get that all straightened out right after the program today. Well, let's talk about COVID just for a second. Let's begin with Anthony Fauci. Got several clips here from Anthony Fauci. And, you know, this guy's tenor now is completely different. Now, Fauci's kind of in a bad spot, because Fauci knows that his job is to keep this invented crisis. This is a self-inflicted wound, ladies and gentlemen, from day one. Remember what I told you from day one. The way we handle this crisis is if you're sick, start taking hydroxychloroquine. If you're not sick, go to work. And if you are a senior citizen, go on hydroxychloroquine today. The only one that's doing that is Ron DeSantis down in Florida. Everybody in their nursing homes by February 1st is going to have had the opportunity to get the vaccine. So Dr. Fauci is in a tough place. They got this vaccine, but he's got to find some way to keep the panic alive. His job is not to make people feel secure, not to make people feel optimistic, not make people feel better, not make them feel that that hope is coming. He wants them to feel panic-driven. We hear about mutations every day, and then, oh, well, maybe the vaccine will take care of this new mutation. Or we might have to adjust the vaccine. We might have to come out with a brand new vaccine to deal with the mutation. So Dr. Fauci's job is to keep panic alive. Normally we think of public officials, their job is to keep hope alive, not Dr. Fauci. Dr. Doom, as many people have heard him, he wants to keep panic and fear alive. This is not a pandemic, it is a panic-demic. Now, Sandra Smith, Fox News, kind of pressed him a little bit in these sound bites. Let's go to clip number 3. You know, Fauci was a part of Trump's team. Now Fauci and others say, this is a total mess. We just inherited this absolute, total, complete mess. It was a disaster. Well, that includes Fauci. He came in with this new administration. So that's what Sandra Smith probes him on a little bit in clip number 3. That's on my list of total absolute failures. It really is not, but I have to pretend it was, because again, I have to create the impression that the Trump administration was an absolute total disaster when it came to COVID. And so I'm just not going to go back and revisit that. Why? Because it makes me look really, really bad. Now, Sandra Smith asks him next, what about these restaurants? What about these business closures? You know, the number of people that are getting infected in restaurant settings is virtually nil, virtually none. What good has it done to close businesses? There's no evidence anywhere, social research, scientific research, medical research, none at all, no evidence, zip, nada, squat, diddly, that these lockdowns of businesses and restaurants have had any effect on flattening the curve or slowing the epidemic. And so Sandra Smith calls out Anthony Fauci on this, clip 4. No, we don't want to talk about statistics. We don't want to talk about the facts. We don't want to talk about evidence. We want to talk about fear and panic and mutations. That's what we want to talk about. And he says, I'm not going to dish dirt on a Democrat governor. I'm just not going to do it. I'll dish dirt all day on Republican governors, but I'm not going to dish dirt on Democrat governors. On Republican governors, I'll dish dirt all day. By the way, on the Florida, they have actually made sure that the vaccine is available and not to all the elderly residents, not just hydroxychloroquine. All right, now what about school closures? That's a good question, because there's absolutely no evidence that schools being in session, that in-person school represents a threat to community health, because virtually no children transmit this virus to anybody else. They're virtually immune from this virus. So Sandra Smith wants to know, why in the world are we closing schools? What's the medical justification for that? What's the scientific justification for that? What's the sociological justification for that? In fact, sociologically, it's the other way around. We have enormous numbers of school-aged children that are committing suicide because they're locked up inside, they don't see their friends, they're not socializing, and it gets to them. Their parents are off at work, and there's only so much isolation that any human being is going to be able to stand. So, what about school closures, Dr. Doom? Clip 5. Let me just see if I can help you out. Do you realize how condescending that is? You're just a blonde bimbo, Sandra Smith. Let me see if I can dumb it down enough that even you could understand what I'm trying to say. Yeah, he was fiercely backpedaling. And of course, he's got to know when. The science is not on his side. The medicine is not on his side. The biology is not on his side. Remember, the World Health Organization, which we just rejoined under the enlightened one, Joe Biden, the World Health Organization say, look, you cannot trust the gold standard test for COVID because it gives too many false positives. They amplify the sample so much that what it is detecting is dead pieces of virus, little tiny fragments of virus that can't make you sick and can't make anybody else sick. So there's an enormous number of false positives if you use what Dr. Fauci says, Dr. Doom says, is the gold standard. So the more evidence we get, the more information we get, the worse Dr. Fauci and the medical establishment looks in all of this. And now we find out that New York, this is according to the New York Attorney General, she's a Democrat, and she says that nursing home coronavirus deaths in New York have been undercounted. She's the Attorney General there, have been undercounted by 50%. In other words, they're way under. The numbers they give for the people who have died in nursing homes, way below the actual figure, maybe by as much as half. So anyway, 70% of the COVID deaths in New York were people of 70 and older. 70%. So when we say, look, the people we got to care about are the aged, the senior citizens, the people over 70. Those are the ones that are most at risk. That's where the effort should be targeted. And that's what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. That's what we should have done from day one. You know, I said from day one, first thing we ought to do is get hydroxychloroquine into the hands of the staff of every assisted living facility in America. Get these senior citizens on the hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, zinc regimen, and that's the best way you can protect their health. Don't leave them vulnerable. Don't leave them, and if we did that, they'd be fine. You know, when people could visit their mothers and fathers in the nursing homes now, they cannot do it. Now, Governor Cuomo's starting to back off. He says, you're going to see some reopening in New York City over these coming weeks. So again, now that we've got a Democrat president in office, now the Democrats want to make him look good. So they want to make it look like Joe Biden is responsible for the reopening of the American economy. And so even Governor Cuomo is going to drop his opposition to closures and start opening things up. And he's getting a lot of heat from people in New York. And you know, it's like in politics, one of the axioms that's true, one of the maxims that's true, is politicians don't see the light until they feel the heat. Well, Cuomo's starting to feel the heat. And listen to this. He says this. He understands that people are suffering. He mentions it here. He's responsible for a lot of this. These lockdowns, these business closures, are not the fault of the coronavirus. They are the fault of politicians who locked their economies down with no good reason. And he says, you know, in urban areas, Cuomo says, by and large across the nation, they are truly suffering. He says, you saw a lot of people leave New York City and other urban areas, and if you take away from New York City restaurants, arts, what's the point of New York City? He said, take this stuff away, what's the point of New York City? A lot of us have been asking that question absolutely for years. All right, Jeff, I want to cycle back to this impeachment trial coming up. Oh, okay. Yeah. This is a good little soundbite on the impeachment, so you'll definitely want to tune in tomorrow when we have the audio fixed. All right, let's grab a couple more sound bites as we come to the close of the program. You know, the meme out there among Democrats is that Republicans are evil. Republicans are wicked. They are extremely viable. They are horrid, very bad, no good, horrible people. Now, Jason Johnson, he's a commentator on MSNBC, which stands for Mostly Stuff That's Nothing But Counterfeit News. He's on giving his enlightened opinion about Republicans. Clip number 6. So you can't negotiate with Republicans, you can't legislate with Republicans, you can't work with Republicans. Why? Because they are terrorists, and we do not negotiate even over legislation with terrorists. Now, John Kerry got a private jet which produces multiple times more carbon emissions than the average American car or than passenger jets. They produce more carbon emissions than passenger jets. Now, he's got a solution for these people that are going to be put out of work because we're shutting down the Keystone Pipeline. Clip number 7. That has nothing to do, ladies and gentlemen. Do not let them lie to you. This has nothing to do with market forces, because every alternative source of energy, except for hydropower, which depends on the flow of rivers over dams, every other one has to be heavily subsidized. Wind, solar, even ethanol has to be heavily subsidized. Can't stand on their own.